In today's video, I'll talk about some of the more interesting interview questions at Fastly. And even if there's not much information available out there, I primarily looked on Glassdoor, I believe there are some interesting trends that you would want to consider while preparing for an interview with them. So without further ado, let's just get to the questions. So on the sixth spot, we have questions around a challenge. And these questions around challenges can be framed both positively and negatively. To start with the negative one, tell me about the time when you failed. This is the classic one of the not so easy to answer behavioral questions. It should be said, if you master these things, if you feel comfortable talking about failure, then you're pretty strong in behavioral interviewing. So remember to also use the STAR method to answer such types of questions where the situation and task and action should be straightforward to say, but in the case of failure, a result is actually your learnings. So there are two primary reasons why they ask you for failures. The first is they want to see whether you can acknowledge that you fail, and the second is what you learn from it. So this would be some advice. I have plenty of other videos if you're interested in learning more about how to answer questions about failure. Or another example of a question about challenge is, tell me about a challenge that you faced in a recent project and how you overcome it. Now, the primary difference between these two examples is that the failure question was around failure, and this one is not supposed to be about failure, right? So if they ask you about a challenging project, you would want to talk about a successful one, right? You would want to advertise yourself on these things. So this would be two examples of questions around challenge. And again, we're talking here about behavioral questions. Tell me about the time when, and they should go with the STAR method to answer them. The fifth category of questions that I'm pretty confident you'll get asked about during job interviews with Fastly are questions that imply you establishing trust. And this trust can mean different things to different types of roles. For example, you must establish trust with the customer. Name a time when you lost trust with the client would be an example of these questions. Or for a more technical type of role, tell me about the time when you received difficult feedback from your manager. How do you manage that relationship with your manager? It's all about trust, right? Of course, it's all about, it's also about explaining things and coming up with data and all that stuff, but it's also about trust, and that's why I include it in this category. Or if you work in a more sales-related role, this question could be framed such as, tell me about the time you had to convince someone of something. Right? So also when you convince someone of something, it's also based on trust. On number 4, we have, why do you want to leave your current role? A pretty standard interview question, and so long as you avoid the classic pitfalls because of my boss or because I felt like I hit a wall there, so long as you're employing a positive attitude and a constructive attitude, and you don't put your previous employer in a bad light, I think you should do pretty well with this question. On number 3, questions around Fastly. So these types of questions differ by the type and the seniority of the role that you're applying for. So in other words, for a customer support, they could simply ask you, what do you know about Fastly? For a sales role, they could ask you, what excites you the most about Fastly? Again, for sales roles, another interesting one would be, describe what Fastly does to someone who has never heard of it. Right? So why they would ask you this question? Because they want to see your ability to generate clarity. Which Fastly values resonate the most with you? Actually, they include some manifesto in each job description that we have a huge impact and we love distributed teams. And they advertise themselves, but their values is actually on their corporate page. And I'm not sure how many of you would be that interested to read them, but here are, those 8 values should you need them. And I'll touch upon these also a bit later. So these would be the questions around Fastly. And I believe you should investigate a little bit about them if you don't know already what they're into, what they're up to. Because it's certainly much better when you know these things going into job interviews. However, just a pro tip here, if they ask you during the job interview how much money Fastly did last year and you have no idea and you're applying for a finance role, that's not a disqualifier, right? So a behavioral interview is not meant to be a comfortable interview in the first place. So just keep that in mind as well. The second most asked types of questions in job interviews at Fastly, according to my research, is questions about yourself. Tell me about yourself, or tell me about your tasks and accomplishment at your current position. Tell me about some work you've done that you're especially proud of. What's your most successful project in free translation? Or tell me about how you ended up doing what you do. There's various other variations, if you want, on this question. Now, I won't insist too much about how do you go answering tell me about yourself, because I have other great videos where I detail the process, and I have many options. I give you a couple of options on how to answer such a general question and see which one would best suit your needs. I also link a couple of these in the video description if you want to learn more. And the first and most commonly asked question at Fastly is why Fastly? You should understand why they ask you in the first place these types of questions. They ask you these questions, why Fastly and tell me about yourself included, because they want to see whether they can start a conversation from there. They want to see if they, first of all, what type of candidate you are, who you really are as a job interview candidate, and eventually, try to ask you follow-up questions and get into let's say the three elements that they want to screen you on, that they believe would make the ideal candidate. So the reason why it's very important that you have a best possible answer for such a question is because it's a starting point. It's a rapport building phase of that interview process. And first impression can often be also the last impression of someone. There's even anti-bias training on the HR side of things, not to be taken away with these impressions. So needless to say, preparing these general types of questions is really important. Now, how do you answer why Fastly? Now, I'm going to give you a couple of pointers here, namely 5 ideas. The first idea I want to touch upon here is you could link your why Fastly with something that they advertise themselves on. So in pretty much any job description, they say they have that marketing manifesto. So for example, if one sample answer would be, why do I want to work for Fastly? Well, because of impact. I believe it's the best way to showcase my skills, and then you'd probably add a little bit more content there, right? So as Fastly said, they are looking for people who want to make an impact. Yes, you can tell them, I want to make an impact, right? So it's as straightforward as that. And these companies actually do appreciate when people are motivated by this higher purpose, if you want, and places where they can make an impact, right? The second strategy you could consider here when answering why Fastly is, what's your core strength? So finding out your core strength, that differentiator between you and other candidates, could be also something that you could link with their core values. Again, not necessarily with their marketing manifesto in the first idea, but with their 8 core values, if you want. For example, my core strength would be that I'm extremely persuasive, right? So I could link this with their core value number 4, we act with passion, right? And if you put this into a paragraph, there you have your why Fastly, right? It's pretty straightforward to understand. The number 3, because I love your product, you have a product that you particularly enjoy using, or that you had tangency with, or that you feel excited working on, and you simply pitch that product as the main reason why you want to join Fastly. Is no problem if you're that straightforward, because it's a tech company, right? So you could be straightforward. So this product pitch is also something that works pretty well with Google, for example, right? So this is where I got it from. And number 4, someone recommended me that I work here, and so far the hiring process has been extraordinary. Everyone has been supportive. I like the people with whom I've been interviewing so far, so that's why I believe it's a good idea, right? So you have the insider information, and you pitch that you're feeling great so far in the process. Now, I know not all of you will be referred by someone internally, but still, if at all an option, yes, that's an efficient one in case you needed a confirmation here. And number 5 would be a combination of the aforementioned items. Namely, you want to say, I want to work at Fastly for 3 reasons. First, I connect very well with the culture. That is, you praise the company culture in a way. Then I believe my unique skill set, my persuasiveness would make a difference. So you talk about your differentiator, your key selling point when compared to other candidates. And number 3 is, I believe this also fits very well in my career trajectory, where I want to be in 5 years. Telling where you want to be in 5 years from someone in HR, this is music to their ears. So use this especially for HR. So this combination of factors, of different elements, would also be very interesting, especially for if you believe that this why Fastly would resonate with you, because some people prefer to be more concise while others prefer to be more detailed, right? So I'm trying to give you more options here, as many options as possible. So keep in mind the reason they ask you these questions, why Fastly and tell me about yourself, is the starting point of a conversation. So that's why they're really that important to prepare going into job interviews. Hopefully you found this useful, and thank you very much for watching.